We'll open up this meeting of the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners, formal and informal session for October 22nd of 2020. And we'll begin with the flag salute. And Christian, can you lead us in the flag salute?
Sure.
Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Christian. We'll move on to calendar session, and I think that we're good for now. Ken, do you know, would you like us to go through calendar? Okay.
If there's anything that that's coming up that you would like to know or you'd like to carry over, we'll make sure it's on it.
Okay. Commissioners, do you have anything that immediately comes to mind?
A couple things. I talked to Ken about one Tuesday, but I've gotten a request from which used to be McMinnville Music Academy, which used to be Humley School of Music, and the Second Winds Band, that it is a fundraising, but they would like to give us a presentation in just what the second and the music that's going on in McMinnville and how the school's grown and what they are. So I told John Peterson that I would bring up to see if we wanted to have a presentation in the near future. He has a slide presentation and the whole works. So.
I missed the first part of where
It
it,
used to be the Humley School. It's McMinnville's School of Music now. They're located out in the old Schmecketa building, and they take underprivileged kids and kids that want to learn music
oh,
and do them. And they're also responsible for the Second Winds Band. And he just wanted to come in, or they wanted to come in and do a history sites presentation on the history of the Second Winds Band and of youth music in McMinnville. So if it's okay, Ken can put it on just as a presentation item.
yeah,
That's fine with me.
I would be interested.
Okay. So Ken, that can be sometime, if we have opening sometime in November.
Well, if the person who's doing the presentation wants to reach out to Carrie and I, we can, to make sure that they're available and we can look at the board schedule.
Okay, I'll have John reach out to you.
And the other thing is, you've probably gotten contacted regarding the 4-H
Yes.
awards,
Okay,
Yes.
great. That's what I was going to say.
but we're not going to be there,
Right.
but we will likely
We'll be likely calling in.
or Zoom or something
Yeah.
for people who can get Zoom. I
We
can't.
will hear your voice.
You will hear I'm going to try.
We will all be in the same ether together.
Well, Christian and I learned that we can't get it in my office, so we had to take
Oh my
Christian's
gosh. Oh, I
laptop
heard
during
this.
a meeting and run down the hall, and it was quite interesting. So,
That was very interesting. For the rest of the meeting, we had a ceiling shot of Mary's office.
Oh, very nice.
Periodically, when the video from her office would come through.
Oh, because you
There
took
was
your
no face
audio.
there.
I see.
So
But
yeah, we
there's-
were trying, but
I don't
Doesn't-
understand why you can't.
That's pretty
see, and
impressive.
you were blaming me. It wasn't.
Well, you
I
are
trust
kind
you
of the
more
one.
now.
See, thank you very
Now
much.
that he's backing you up. How about that?
Thank you.
But yeah, so 4-H awards on
Monday night.
Monday night.
Monday night.
And the other thing was, I'm wondering, can we get, and I don't know if this, can we plan on a work session for the AOC dues structure?
That'd be great.
There are several proposals for increasing dues, and I wanted to have that discussion at some point soon, because I
Yes.
think they want us to weigh
They
in.
want to hear. Yeah, thank you.
How soon do you want to schedule that?
Do we have room next week?
Probably can put it on the agenda for next week.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, that's fine.
Mhm.
Because, yeah, I think we do need to have a session to talk about all that.
Okay.
Not that I care.
You have to,
You have to care.
you have to, because
I actually
you
do-
have that institutional.
I actually do-
reference
I
point.
That's
actually
right.
do care, so.
This was a lot of work that you did over the last year
Yeah.
or so, last 2 years. Thank you.
Just
You know-
sorry it took so many years to do it.
My head is so full of dates that I wrote down Wednesday, October 28th in the evening, and I don't actually know. I feel like it's something that might be. I will do more research on it though.
On what?
I don't know what it is.
Other than
Stan
October
used to do
28th.
that. He used to say to Carrie, what's this? I have something tonight. What is this? And she'd go, well, you have blah, blah.
It's never happened with Carrie and me.
Yeah.
Nope. Okay, well, I think that's it for
I
now.
love Carrie.
We're
She
having
tells
too much
Carrie
fun,
Caroline,
so
tell me what
You've
I.
got a couple things. Thanks, Ken.
That's right. What we're doing. Okay.
All right, and if anything comes up, we'll be sure to direct it to Carrie and Carolina and Ken. We move on to item B, which is public comment. And due to COVID-19 and physical distancing requirements, anyone wishing to submit general public comment or comments related to a specific agenda item may do so in written format by email at bocinfo@co.emhill.or.us or by mail at 535 Northeast 5th Street, McMinnville, Oregon 97128. Any comments received prior to the meeting will be shared with the Board of Commissioners and submitted to the record. And today we have two public comments that Carolina has shared with us. One is from Larry Strober with the Rotary, and his request is around a peace pole. And it sounds like Commissioner Olson may bring this up later. And then the second one is from Philip Higgins, and it's regarding the property at 185 Maple Street in the city of Yamhill. And he has also submitted a general public comment request. So commissioners, is that something that you would like to acknowledge or allow him to do? I believe he wants to speak publicly.
Yeah, I'd allow him to speak publicly.
Sure.
Yeah, okay, great. And Philip Higgins, can you come to the microphone and state your name and address for the record? And thank you for giving us the public comment beforehand. It's kind of nice.
No, my pleasure, and Phil Higgins, 415 West Everett Drive in beautiful Newport, Oregon. So, appearing today on behalf of all of you at the behest of Mayor Potter, actually, so not appearing for myself, but appearing for the city of Yamhill. I appreciate you guys taking the written testimony ahead of time. I mean, I presume everybody's read it. We've all been down this road and had these conversations in the past, so I don't really think we need to rehash or go through the letter, verbatim. What I do think is important is to reiterate the city of Yamhill's continued interest in pursuing a resolution for this particularly pesky problem that we find ourselves in, and figuring out how to sort of staunch the flow of taxpayer funds into pursuing the old course of action and maybe come up with a plan for a new course of action. So that is sort of what I was dispatched to reiterate in response to what I've done here. The other two items that I did not put in here that I'd really like to sort of put forth to the Board of Commissioners. As you may or may not know, I've got over a decade's worth of experience working for various major oil companies, regional distributors, and multi-site dealers in the petroleum sector. There are resources that I'm more than happy to work with staff to direct them to that will allow Yamhill County to probably get some positive traction at free rates. At significantly reduced or free rates in order to deal with some of the remediation, deal with some of the grant proposals that need to be put forth to the EPA in order to get this site remediated. The other thing too, which is probably the most pressing thing in all of this, not that getting this property, unlocked from the current course of action is pressing, but as fall is approaching, the property owner, which is the county, needs to really address some of the attractive nuisance issues and do some property preservation on site. This site's been unheated for a significant amount of time, which, as we know, all leads to mold intrusion. There's some water barrier issues that I think are coming to a fold, especially on the west side of the property. So there needs to be, and the property needs to be secure from vermin. So the county did a fantastic job cleaning up the exterior of the property for some requests that the city of Yamhill and the Yamhill Downtown Association made, and we appreciate that. But there's some things that really need to be addressed in terms of preserving the asset so that it's potentially usable as opposed to something that just needs to be torn down. Because right now it just can't wither over again in its current state. And that's all I have.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Do you have questions or comments? Yes.
No, I'm just wondering what our next, because I know during the last executive session where we can't make decisions, we did have a discussion about this property. So I'm wondering what the next iteration of this is. Is this another executive session or is this just a work session? Because there's a lot that Mr. Higgins brought up in his
Yeah.
email, and I'd like to have county council address some of those, and then the additional concerns about the property, the interior of the property. I mean, so what's the next step?
Well, the next step is up to the board. Executive sessions are available to the board if you'd like to have a discussion about this in executive session. It's not required. The board is certainly free to discuss what the next steps are with this property in open session.
Okay.
It's entirely up to the board in terms of what you'd like to
great.
see done and how you'd like to move forward. The executive session around real property transactions is largely there to make sure that the county doesn't feel like it's competing or negotiating on real property transactions, buying or selling in ways that would be unfair or different than other parties
Right.
dealing at arm's length. So again, if there are elements that you'd like to discuss about that property in terms of what a sale or a transfer of the property might look like, and you'd like to talk about that in executive session before we have a discussion in open session, we can certainly do that. But if you have questions now about any of the things that Mr. Higgins has raised, we can certainly talk about some of those things now too, or at a different work session if you'd like to set one up.
I'm thinking perhaps we might need a short executive session
Sure.
and then
Yeah.
a work session,
And then a work
because
session.
the question, I mean, we really do have some urgency here in terms of the weather. Obviously, there was frost this morning and it's cold. And we're going to have rains and all of that. So there's that part of it. But there's also the greater question, which is about the property in general. And we didn't make a decision, but we did have a rather lengthy discussion.
Right.
So
Good point.
do you think that another executive session would be helpful, or should we just move to?
I kind of wonder whether we should just move to a work session, and perhaps one that includes maybe Philip or maybe Mayor Potter, maybe somebody on behalf of the city. And I wonder whether it might be helpful to have Mary Camerata at DEQ maybe call in even, because she's been very ready to extend. She at one point asked, is it time for me to fill out the EPA paperwork?
Right.
I was like, whoa. That was a year and a half ago.
Well, and if I can interject too, I do have some additional paperwork that I can submit that'll kind of help the board of commissioners in terms of decision-making process for remediation. And then
Oh, sure.
Going out on a slight limb here, but in terms of property preservation, I think that a partnership can be struck with the city of Yamhill and their existing maintenance department to sort of do some of the heavy lifting on the county's behalf, so you're not allocating, drive time and people going out there with meetings to go across the street.
Right.
Do some approved repairs.
I want to be careful, though. I think we need to make some decisions before we start talking about the more, the minutia. So I wanted to get county council on the first part of this, which was what we talked about in our executive session.
Yeah.
And that brings us to all these other.
I mean, if you'd like, we could have a brief session at the end of today, but let's hear from Commissioner.
Yeah, I
Lonston,
guess
too.
my opinion is, that we've discussed it in open session. This has been ongoing in executive session for years. Personally, I think we can move right to a work session. I don't see there's really a big need
Okay.
to take the time and have another executive session, because I don't think that will necessarily change anything. So I think we can move directly to a work session.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Okay.
As
And
far as-
then, Christian, were you going to add anything, or no? You were just saying that.
No, I think that's fine. If there are questions that, any of you have about what these next steps might look like, we can certainly talk about those individually and then have a broader discussion at the work session.
And I think.
No, go ahead.
I think since weather is turning, and it did, especially when folk talked about the water issues on the west of the property, which would be on the Main Street side of the property.
Maple Street's the actually, I'm sorry, it's on the east side.
East side on the Maple Street.
Between the house and the.
Yeah, between where the old house is.
Right.
The house, do not waste time or effort maintaining that, that's too far gone to be addressed, but the actual, retail building itself, you can see where there's areas where there's, easy moisture intrusion into the property.
And Ken would like to say something. Mary, is that a commissioner? Okay.
No, I was just gonna say, just recognizing that we're in the public comment
Yeah.
period, and, my recommendation would be is before we start having the work session right now, unless the board wants to have the work session right now, that if we wanted to get that on the calendar, and then we could have this more in-depth discussion during the work session.
Yeah, what,
I want to make sure. I thank you, Commissioner.
I just had one question. There were a couple of things I want to make sure that we're careful about, and that is the parameters of our discussion. Number one, putting the first steps. First step is what would we like to see happen with this property, and then we can talk about what that would look like. So I feel like we're not there because we haven't done that.
Yeah.
So I want to do that first, and then, so I'm wondering about the appropriateness of other parties at this point in the next work session when we haven't
Oh, I see.
gotten to that place. I want to be respectful of the process, but I don't want to waste any more time. So I don't know how that works. Are we in danger of any kind of, as far as including other parties in the discussion when we haven't come to any conclusions, or is that part of the process to come to a conclusion?
I think if are we in some danger, or are we running afoul of some sort of statutory or regulatory process? Not at all. Like I said, the purposes for the executive session are there for the benefit of the board. If you'd like to have a more sort of open and just a discussion among yourselves with staff about any questions you might have about what our options are, what we might or might not do with the property, who we might or might not sell it to, at what amounts and under what terms. If you'd like to have a conversation about that, which would be not unusual at all, we do that with regularity. If the board would rather have that kind of a conversation before we then go into an open session and talk with potential purchasers or potential transferees about some of those details, then we could certainly do that. Or we could have that discussion and be prepared to talk about those issues at the work session as well. Either one works.
Just to clarify, Commissioner, are you asking about, because right now we're on a certain course right now in discussions with the previous property owner, and whether or not there's potential of some type of, if we're changing course or something with those negotiations?
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was getting at. We could talk about all those things in executive session, or we can talk about them in open session.
And that's where I'm going, as far as we haven't wrapped anything up as far as making any kind of, coming to any conclusions other than having a discussion. And we have been on course for one particular course of action. If that's going to change, then I think we need to have made that decision.
Right, and we haven't yet.
And we have
And
not.
that's your point, is that when we were in executive session, we directed staff in a certain way, but we didn't make a decision.
So,
Yeah.
so
Not that any final decisions can be made and exactly get a sense of which direction the board would like us to go.
exactly there. And the other thing is, I'm wondering if in lieu of an executive session, if discussions with individually would answer some of those questions, or if we could plan on maybe if like a really short executive session prior to a work session, just to
Oh, I see what you mean.
get to the place
Yeah.
where we're into the work session
Mhm.
with a plan.
Right. Right now, we're technically question mark, where are we if we get potential partners?
And I do have an update from last week, which
Oh.
we could discuss in executive session,
And that would be probably important to
or
hear.
we could discuss it in open session if the board were.
But right, but to Mr. Huffer's point, this is a public
Public
comment,
comment.
and we're
so-
moving it into a work session.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
we have to decide what we want to do.
Yeah, I would be happy to go with Commissioner Sterrett's suggestion. If we can do a short executive session immediately before a work session that includes other folks.
yeah, I think to me that makes sense because we're not wasting time. We're doing it the same day. We're
Yeah.
doing it at the same time. Have a 15, 20-minute executive session up front before we go into the work session. work session, I don't have any problem with that whatsoever.
I believe that Commissioner Starrett said 3 minutes. Did you say 3
I said
minutes?
15.
Oh, I heard 3.
That was wishful, selective hearing, how like a man. So question, if
Okay,
we were,
thanks for your patience, by the way.
sorry, we're just,
I
you know,
love the wheels of government turning, so that's okay.
sometimes they turn
this is
very slowly, as you know.
transparency.
So if we were to maybe change the order of the agenda to where we have an executive session prior to the work session, which is normally one of the first things on the agenda.
And I just want to highlight that some of the technology challenges that we have on with the live streaming and how we do the video, that's why we try to schedule the
Yes.
executive sessions either before or at the end, after we've adjourned our regular session. Because we don't have the ability to kind of hit pause while we go into an executive
Right.
session and then unpause it and resume regular session. There's some challenges associated with that, the technology kind of ties our hands to that. But the other thing that I also wanted to just highlight for the board too, Lindsay and I, HHS, have another topic regarding property transactions that we were also hoping to get on the calendar for an executive session for next Thursday.
Okay.
And so if we wanted to maybe
Mhm.
have those 2 items and maybe schedule it before formal session, if it works for your schedule for the next.
I think that's great.
We can notice it, we can get it set up, we can have the executive session for next Thursday morning, and then also have the work session.
Right.
If you choose to, for that same meeting, that we adjourn the executive session, and then we would go.
Come into
regular
formal session.
So we could
Yeah.
have the executive session like at 8:30 or whatever we think is needed, and then go into the formal session after executive.
Yeah.
It's up to your availability.
I think that works for me.
That would work for me, Commissioner.
Sure.
So, Ken, if we could do that, if we could schedule the 2 executive sessions for next Thursday prior, and make sure we have enough time prior to the formal session, then that would be fine.
And I think the item that Lindsay and I are going to be bringing forward, I don't think it's going to require an extensive.
Yeah.
amount of time.
Okay.
So,
I think probably an hour
Yeah.
should be sufficient, but we can start it at 8:30 to give ourselves additional time.
Yeah, the HHS one is really
Simple.
fairly
Simple.
straightforward.
So if we met at 8:30, that, let's say if it went to 9:30, that would give us a chance to get everything set up for the formal session at 10.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, so what I'm hearing is you'd also like to have the work session on the, for next week's agenda as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And is that one where we want to invite knowledgeable outside experts or interested parties to that work session?
To that work, the formal work session,
Yeah.
yes, after the executive
Yeah.
session, when we have made a decision,
Yeah.
yes, I think then
Okay.
we should have the work session with the mayor or Phil or whoever's gonna represent the different ideas,
Mhm.
then come to do the work session.
Okay.
and that. But I think we can do it on the same day, so.
Thank you.
So Phil, that kind of answer for you, how we're gonna approach
How
it.
we move forward.
So when we go into the work session, we'll have a lot of that preliminary stuff done in an executive session before we go into the work session.
Great, I'm completely comfortable with that, I just want to make sure that I'm going to circle back to the property preservation, weatherproofing aspect of it, just so that doesn't get lost in the
Yeah.
decision-making process, because obviously, if the asset rocks into the ground, it's going to make decisions on what to do with it, so.
And I can talk to Mr. Higgins after the meeting today to see
Sure.
if we can maybe start some of those things moving in anticipation of next week.
Because anything we need to
Something
do
needs to happen.
involves making sure that the property
Yeah,
is.
We'd be happy to accept any help the city's willing to provide. And
I know you've got my contact.
Yeah.
And perhaps at that work session, you alluded to I think, identify resources. Can you bring that information? Okay, thank you.
I
And
wanna
then
make-
I will reach out to Mary Camerata as well to
Okay.
find out what it looks like on her end.
And I expect I'll be speaking with her over the course of the next.
Oh,
week as
that's
well.
right.
Okay.
So-
Okay.
Yeah, I think Casey, if you can send us that information for the work session, anytime, you could send that way, that gives time to review it before we go into the executive session and into the work session. So if he has additional information, you can send that to staff anytime we can start looking at that additional information.
I want to make sure we're not running afoul of any kind of RFP requirements when we're dealing with
Right.
potential vendors.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's important. It's important to gather information, but to not make decisions until
Right.
having gone through a process. Actually, don't really know what it is, but we'll see, right?
Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks.
I'll
Thanks.
send all that
Mysterious.
to you guys individually, and I don't know, Chris, you want me to CC you on?
Please.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thank you.
And I was actually just learning in a meeting this morning about the state statute that passed relatively recently around allowing counties and cities to land bank brownfields and then clean them up and then redevelop them in a vision that a city or a county wants. So I'm going to ask Mary Camerata about that as well.
Oh, good idea. Okay.
It's like, I think it's just another piece of the allowing counties and cities to reshape landscapes in ways that are slightly different than our current land use.
Okay. That's interesting.
I
Okay.
know. I only have a tiny bit of knowledge about it, so I'll try to learn more.
Okay. Good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
Commissioners, I appreciate your
Thank you.
indulgence as always.
Oh, no
Thanks very
problem.
much. Good to see you.
Well, we will move on from item D, public comment, to item E, which is work sessions, and we have none today. Move on to item F, which is department updates. And our first department update is with the Department of Community Justice and Director Jessica Peach. And welcome, and thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Jessica.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Are you comfortable with me removing your mask, or would you prefer it?
I am.
All right.
Since you're a presenter, Jess, we'll let you take it.
We can hear you much better without it.
It's the glasses.
This is what we've heard.
So thank you so much for the opportunity to present to you today. I realize that due to COVID, we haven't been able to be together, at least since January. I've been on last update, so I feel like I have a lot to share with you. But at any time, if I'm going a little long, I'll let Ken, I can so I'll start with a bit of an update with regard to adult juvenile. As you can imagine, with COVID, we needed to make various changes to operations and county business, being shut down immediately when the governor shut down the state, and then slowly opening up. And I can tell you that I think that we have a very safe plan with regard to our staff. We continue to use the telecommuting policy that the board has approved, and we have our staff in the office a minimum of 50%. Some staff are back full time. But I feel that all of our current operations were able to complete field work and office visits in the city of Manheim. And we began your analysis again, court attendance, and those type of things. So we continue to work out the kinks as we go. But so far, we have been very, very safe with regard to PPE and hygiene items and cleaning items. So moving on, I wanted to provide you with just a little update with regard to state funding. As you know, my adult budget is primarily supported by state funds due to the supervision of felony probation. So just a little background, the 2019-21 budget that was allocated to community corrections was $268 million. So that just gives you an idea of where we're at in the current funding. So earlier in 2020, for the 21-23 biennium, the projection was $278.8 million. And that was based on the population forecast as well as a 5.6 increase in inflation. Department of Corrections also plans to submit a POP package, in which they're requesting an additional 7% for inflation, simply to capture the inflation of cost of personnel, which is really what community corrections supports, is mostly people. However, in October 2020, we just recently saw a huge decrease in population, as you can imagine, with regards to the suspension of court and slowing of the docket. And we've seen a huge decrease, in fact, 1,400 cases since the earlier in the year as of October. So that has dropped the proposed budget to 268 days, which is where we were last year without the actual cost. And of course, you may be familiar that there's several ballot measures as well as potential legislative concepts that may affect either positively or negatively that budget as well. So more to come. I'll continue to keep you updated as I hear. And of course, we're going into the budget planning section where I really never know what the budget is until long after. So it's always a challenge, but we will certainly do our best. Moving on to pretrial justice, I think all of you are familiar with Ottoman, which is a pretrial software program that we use Justice Reinvestment Funds to implement. And I'm delighted to tell you that we officially fully implemented it for daily use as a case management and data system as of May 2020. And we're currently working on what I call phase 2, which is the interface process with ATIMS, which is the jail information system. And basically what that will provide is it will allow us to shift over demographic information into our system from the jail information system, which will provide a lot of cost savings and time savings for our staff and information. And we just received our first data extract from Ottoman as of October 1st. So we're partnering with IT and going through and looking at that data so we can provide regular updates to you, to legislative partners as well. I also wanted to let you know we're collaborating with the Oregon Judicial staff as well. They have a pretrial information system that's tied to Odyssey. So it's really been great in being able to look at all the data sets and make comparisons. And so that's been a really unique collaboration.
I was like,
I've
what's the
never been
thing
known
he's
to
trying to
be
tell?
soft-spoken.
I know, right?
Was a cheerleader.
Thinking of all of your roles.
Exactly. And lastly, with regard to pretrial, I'm just delighted to say that Yamhill County continues to be a leader in the state. Despite COVID, we've had several partners that continue to visit with us. Benton County was just recently on site for 2 occasions. And so I'm just delighted that we continue to be an example for the state of justice, despite our small size. So moving on to detention, I'm pleased to tell you that we're in the process of and near completion of the detention camera project, which will replace all current cameras as well as add a couple more, so we'll have 8 in total. And my understanding is that each of those cameras come with its own unique microphone, which will for us to capture audio as well. So this upgrade will greatly improve the clarity of the images recorded and wider spaces and wider images as well. So we're really excited to have that in place. And that was a capital improvement. Also, to update you as of July 2020, that the detention school that is provided to us can work in May to the increase, which you can imagine. Educational records than the detention facility. So we're really pleased with regards to that.
Well, Jessica, how are we managing that as far as the class time in detention?
We are able to support, well, ODE supports through the Multnomah County
Right.
Education system, one full teacher. So we do have one full-time teacher that is with the youth Monday through Friday. COVID was a bit of an issue, as you can imagine, but I want to say at least 3 months ago, we were able to get that person back in person to work.
So is it the same woman who's been teaching?
I believe so.
Okay,
Yes.
she did a great job. So they are able to do in-person
They are.
but the numbers are down for
Right.
those who are in detention.
Absolutely.
That's a good caveat.
Yeah, our daily average long rate was maybe 13. During COVID, we got down to about 1
Yeah.
at one point, but we're currently around 7 or 8 And so, yes, I was really pleased, the Oregon Department of Education, I mean, they had some issues with regard to reinstating classes, but they really did prioritize the detention facility. We were very fortunate. You can imagine it's difficult to have virtual anyway, but to be in virtual school in a detention facility.
Right.
And how are you managing the spacing of the kids?
Absolutely. So, I believe you all have been into
Yes.
the detention facility, so
Mhm.
we're able to manage it. It's a fairly large space. So we're confident
Okay.
that we're able to social distance and keep everyone safe. And of course, we have lots of PPE and hand sanitizer and all the cleaning supplies as well.
Good. I'm glad that you're keeping the kids engaged.
Absolutely.
Important.
And I
Thanks.
seem to recall that at least the teacher, when we were there, mentioned that kids make great strides in the brief time that they're there because they're such a focused.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're delighted. Thank
Good.
you for asking that question.
Mhm.
Also wanted to let you know, we have been in discussions with the Clatsop County Detention Director, and they're interested in additional contracting of beds with us that would come into fruition in July of 2021. But we're delighted. I don't know if that will look like our whole county contract or not. We do currently already have an outdated detention bed that we utilize in the services that we provide. So more to come with that. And then I will just wrap up the email piece with some good news. I wanted to let you know that OJDDA, which is the Juvenile Directors Association, each year they hold a conference, which unfortunately didn't happen this year. But they also took the opportunity, each year they award various prizes. So they didn't want to disregard that recognition. So I'm pleased to tell you that Erin Stopper received the award for the 2020 Custody Book of the Year in our detention facility. And in addition to that, Lisa Haynes from our probation department, she was named the Northwest Regional Juvenile Justice Professional of the Year. So we're very, very proud of both of those.
Congratulations. We definitely saw
That's
some
great.
congratulatory emails going around
Back
too,
and
but
forth.
it's
Yeah.
really nice to acknowledge it in public too.
It is, it
Yeah.
is. I'm delighted. And
Yeah, it's
we'll
not,
acknowledge
it's
that we
not
didn't
really
get it in
surprising
person.
just that your staff does the way they do and everything, so it's always great to get that acclamations, but I think the important thing is that our citizens and our staff and the commissioners know just how good of a staff we have, and I think that's a good indication.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then last segment, I know I'm taking up some time here, finishing up with parks. As you can imagine with COVID, we had some issues with regard to being able to meet our contract requirements without having any work groups. This is so. We were able to hire 3 park rangers, which were seasonal. We usually hire 2, but we're able to hire 3, which significantly assisted with the work. And we do plan to keep 2 of those on through at least the end of the leaves season until fall. So probably through the end of this. February, I am pleased to say that we have eliminated out of custody work crews, and those have been very, very beneficial for us. Crews. So I'm sad to report to you, I think you're all aware, Jared Lonston, who was a parks manager, unfortunately, he decided to return home to his family where he grew up in Indiana. I think COVID has made us all think a little differently, and although he had planned at some point in his life to return, I think COVID changes those things, and he decided to go further. But I'm pleased to say that he also received what I would consider promotion, and that he's the superintendent of parks there in Greenville. So we're really, really pleased for him, for sure. But really sad to see him go. He's an incredible asset, and I never heard a negative word about Jared. So. But on the other hand, we do have a recruitment, and that closed on Friday. And I'm really pleased to say that we have some really impressive candidates. So we'll be going through those applications and have having virtual interviews. And so hope to have someone to present to you soon in that meeting.
Great. That's good to hear.
Thank you.
And then just one last thing with regard to the Parks Board. So we've been working with them in Jared's absence, but we do currently have 2 vacancies on the board, and I believe that's posted on the website. But if you folks have anyone that you think would be interested, feel free to refer them to me or to the board. And I'm working with the board with regard to them.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
So that's all I have for you today, unless you have questions.
Other questions, Commissioners, or comments?
No, I just think Jessica leader has just done a remarkable job, and her whole department just does a remarkable job. And I think any county would like to do the job that we do in Yandell County.
Thank you for your work. We appreciate you.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Jess.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you, Commissioner.
I did hear a lot of very positive things about how quickly your staff transitioned in parole and probation to the COVID environment and the restrictions and challenges. So like very, very positive comments out in the community.
Yeah, and just a really quick
Yeah.
comment. It was really interesting to me because the feedback I received from my staff is that even though in the beginning, most of our contacts were virtual, they actually had to work on that.
Yeah.
We needed each other. And not only that, there was really some deep content. Again, because we just needed each other. So it's really been interesting.
That's good to hear. But I wanted to make sure that you knew that there were a lot of positive comments on the community about how quickly and effectively you transitioned over. Yeah. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
See y'all soon.
Take care.
Yes.
Thank you for coming.
And we'll work on those lipstick meetings, right?
Yes.
Oh, technology.
I still don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm practicing.
I'll help you.
Dad will never get any place.
I'll try that.
Why can't we see each other? Now, why can't we hear each other? All right, thank you, Director. And we will move on to
Funny.
Planning Department update with Director Friday. Thank you so much. And it's very good to see you here
Friday, thank you so much.
without me babbling us in and out.
Yeah.
And things have been going pretty well in our department. Of course, it's continued to be a real challenge, just juggling the various schedules of work from the office and home, since several of our staff members have younger kids at home. But the public actually has been very patient with us going through this process, and I really appreciate that. One of the tools that has helped has been our e-permitting software, Sella. We were able to issue permits pretty smoothly with minimal interaction. We have a Dropbox out in front of our office where people can drop permits, plans off and things like that. They call ahead and we take them from there. I did want to just really credit IT and our staff for making that e-permitting a success. And I just wanted to publicly thank and recognize Diane Fisher and especially Alicia Shell for working hard with IT to make that a reality. Alicia led the training and troubleshooting of the system. I did very little with it, and it's been a real success during this time. In other good news, I passed out these notes. Earlier this month, we had the Household Hazardous Waste collection event, and it went very well. Ashley Watkins, who's here, set up a sign-up system to manage the traffic flow, and it resulted in very short waits and a lot of positive feedback. I just, after every event, Ashley will write up notes for herself and for me, and I just decided to share those this time. And I did get actually a personal thank you from John Gray. I don't know if you
Yeah.
folks know John Gray, but
Yes.
he was our county council for several decades, and have a lot of respect for him. And he wrote, "I want to congratulate the county on the outstanding household hazardous waste disposal event at the fairgrounds today. Very well organized and ran, our fastest ever in and out time. Hope to see you again someday when COVID is over."
Bravo.
Oh, that's nice.
And since we all know that's been a thing that people have complained about,
Yeah,
nice
and
job.
I know Ashley has really worked hard on trying to make sure to get people in and out. And I think her first event, I got a call at 9 o'clock at night where she was still out there working on things because they had a spill and then they had a backup of traffic and it went on to Lafayette Avenue. And all of that has been, little by little solved by Ashley, not by me, but by Ashley. And just wanted to thank her for that. I don't know if you wanted to say anything or you didn't arrange this.
It's good notes too. I've seen them in the past. And I'm
Thank
really
you.
glad to see them. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley.
And I think lastly, I really have, I think, a fairly short report. I just wanted to give some praise to our county administrator. This has been a really stressful time, one where we needed to have really clear communication. And I really appreciate the communication Ken has provided with myself and the other department heads. And I'm hopeful, and I think that will probably continue post-COVID. Really, that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Questions or comments?
No, go ahead.
The only comment I have is, over the last several months, Ken, the complimentary comments I've received about your staff and the work they've done on inspections and on helping people with plans and everything has been more than exemplary. And so pass that on to your staff and the job Ashley does, of course. We all appreciate the job Ashley does.
Yes, appreciate it.
And Commissioner Sarah had something.
I
Don't
just
go
had-
too far.
I just had one question. Well, also I want to echo what Commissioner Olson said about the your department and it's sort of an institution in this county in terms of customer service and the ability to get from point A to point B where other counties are, it's this tortuous process. So always appreciate that philosophy. But the other question is, since you're driven or beholden to the revenue from, the permitting, where are we there?
It's down. And I was asking this morning our inspectors, what do they think? And really the last 5 to 6 weeks, it seems like everyone has pushed pause on a lot of projects. The good thing is we have a lot of projects in the pipeline. We have people, when they apply for what's called plan review, and they give a portion of the money for us looking over the plans, and they've already given us architectural drawings, so they're pretty far into the project. A lot of those have not been picked up, and so we're not seeing the revenue from those, the permit fees from those. But I have to imagine not all of those are going to be shelved forever, and that people will pick them up. I think people are just having to push pause on things, and right now we're right on track for. I check it every week to see what our funds are at. But I do see, usually we're a little bit like the squirrel that collects all the nuts during the summer and fall, and so we usually are further ahead budget-wise. I will say though that usually, I've looked at quarters when I first became director, and the fall and winter were good, but really the spring is where we have usually the biggest income from permit fees. So I'm hoping for a good spring. I'm not trying to sound any alarm bells. It is down a little bit, but I think there's reasons enough for it to be down. And I'm actually kind of surprised it's not down more. So I'm very grateful actually that we've kept permitting going. We've kept as many contractors, employed, because we can get their inspections done. We can get
exactly.
Going. So, and I see a lot of big projects in the cities and cities that we do the permitting and inspection for, and those, I was reminded of those this morning when I was kind of doing this informal survey on what folks thought, and we have literally hundreds of houses in the cities that we'll either do the electrical inspection for or building and electrical for, that's going to be coming up in the next 6 months. So I'm hopeful that we'll not have a significant downturn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Ashley. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you, Ken.
Thanks,
I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Ken.
Yeah, your team is really good.
Mhm.
Oh, and Ken, one last thing is that city manager and the city of Willamina was asked, Kenna was asked about something recently and related to planning, and she just praised your inspectors. So she's very glad for that partnership. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners, we will move on to G, consent agenda. And we have the minutes, which you've all seen and initialed.
Mhm.
And I would entertain a motion to approve if you so were willing.
I would move approval of item G.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G1. Move on to item I, which is other business. And today we have item I1 is the consideration of approval of the ratification of the 2020 through 2023 collective bargaining agreement between Yamhill County and the Yamhill County Deputy District Attorneys Association, also known as the YCDDAA, effective through June 30th of 2023. And Christian, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Only if there are any questions or comments from the board. The draft agreement or the final agreement is in the packet.
Yep.
I think it's a good outcome. We're negotiating through the spring and summer in the midst of COVID, and so that I was glad we were able to get that done. So yeah, really, it's just if you got any other questions before you take action on the
No, but
CBA.
if none, I'll make a motion that we ratify the 2020 through 2023 collective bargaining agreement between Yamhill County and Yamhill County Deputy District Attorneys Association, YCDDAA, and that's effective through June 30, 2023.
Great, thank you, Commissioner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I1. Thank you. Item I2 is consideration of approval of extending the provisions of the 2020 through 2023 YCDDAA collective bargaining agreement to the non-bargaining employees at the District Attorney's Office. And Ken or Christian, do you have anything you'd like to add?
No, it's just that this is really one employee.
Yeah, that's
The manager.
Yeah.
That you were saying, element of it.
actually had to do a mental search, and that was the person I came up with. So yeah.
Well,
Chris,
based,
okay.
based on our agreement, it's only one employee, but 1 to 10 doesn't really make any difference. I think it's important to extend to non-union employees the same rights that union employees get. So I will make the recommendation that we approve extending the provisions of the 2020 through 2023 YCDDAA collective bargaining agreement to non-bargaining employees of district attorney's office.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item I2. Item I3 is consideration of approval to extend the current COVID-19 paid administrative leave policy, which is Board Order 20-91, to expire on December 31st, 2020, or upon termination of the state of emergency declared by the Governor of Oregon, whichever occurs first, unless extended by the Board of Commissioners. And Ken, would you like to add anything? We've seen this.
This is just one of the temporary policies, and in an abundance of caution, and then also, we've been extending it 30-day periods, and so there's a change to the end of the calendar year.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's perfectly appropriate. Commissioners, do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay. Thank you for developing this policy and continuing to implement or to extend it. Well, I would move approval then of item I3. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I3. Item I4 is consideration of approval to extend the current temporary COVID-19 telecommuting policy, which is Board Order 20-104, to expire on December 31st of 2020 or upon termination of the state of emergency declared by the Governor of Oregon, whichever occurs first.
And again, this is another one that we've extended a few times. My recommendation is we keep this policy in place so we can accommodate, as needed or be able to adapt to situations should further restrictions come down or to comply with current OSHA regulations and current guidelines. To have this policy in place that enables departments to facilitate working requests as we continue to navigate the pandemic.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we just heard from Director Beach about the value that it's had. So, And unless there are further discussions, I would move approval of item I4. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item I4. Item I5 is consideration of extending the emergency declaration in Yamhill County as previously approved by Board Order 20-93, which is the COVID emergency. And Commissioner, were you able to get anything?
I did. I
Thank you
checked
very
with Director Manfrin, and she suggested that we keep it in place just because if they were to need additional PPE or other types of resources, we'd at least have that in place.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for doing that. I appreciate it.
So then I guess, Commissioners, one other item to consider would be how much longer you'd like to extend the emergency declaration. If you'd like to see it extended to the end of next month, or if like the policies that we just considered, if you'd like to see it extended through the end of the year, or it can always be rescinded by the board sooner than that. But that's really the only outstanding question. I think if there's consensus among the board that it needs to be extended is for how long.
I'd make the consent. I think it's a good thing, and just for simplification purposes, I think it would be easier to track and so save staff work if we just extend it to the end of the year along with the other emergency.
To match our individual
Yeah,
policies.
so we extend it to the end of the year.
Commissioner, how do you feel about that?
Well, hopefully we'll be able to wrap this up before the end of the year. But if not, we can always rescind it
And we'd probably be rescinding all three if we had to.
at the same
Yeah.
time. Sure.
Right.
So I would go along.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you for bringing that up.
Sure. Well, I'm sorry there isn't a extension document prepared for the packet today, but we'll go ahead and prepare it. It'll be exactly like the other declarations you've seen. It'll just have the extended date through the end of the calendar year.
That's what I was guessing. Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Well, then I would move that we approve item I5, extending the emergency declaration through December 31st of 2020. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item I5. Item I6 is consideration of accepting the quote and approval of the purchase of 32 Lenovo ThinkPads X1 Carbon Gen laptops, 28 ThinkCenter M75Q-1 micro desktops, and 5 ThinkPad X1 Carbon laptops with 4G capability from Lenovo in the amount of $68,558. And Ken, would you like to add anything?
And this is just part of our computer replacement program, to get the order, so desktop support, we start cycling out some of the other computers and laptops that start there. It's a budgeted program that we have where every department pays in a replacement fund, and then, we use those funds to replace and make sure that we have the most up to date with the security and support for our computers to continue to operate.
Great. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay.
I would make a recommendation then that there's no other comments, that we approve item number I6, and that's purchase of computers.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item I6. Item I7 is consideration of authorizing Yamhill County Health and Human Services to submit an application for grant funding to the Oregon Health Authority's Oregon Immunization Program for COVID-19 vaccine planning and infrastructure support in the amount of $24,624. And there's a detailed memo in the packet, but Commissioner, did you want to add anything?
No, I had a conversation with Director Manfrin. A
Good.
couple of things. I'm looking for the red flags around COVID vaccine
Sure.
implementation, mandates, potential mandates, things like that.
Yeah.
And so at this point, I have not seen anything that I have concerns about.
Mhm.
However, the Oregon Health Authority has put together a plan, which is pretty much just an initial plan for implementing a program. I have concerns about that, but that is not what is before us
Yeah.
today. So I think at this point, I would just move approval of item 7.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I think that we should make sure that we continue the discussion around it. And if you see red flags, just let us know, and we can even ask Director Manfrin to address all of us if that's a needed thing.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
thank you for bringing it up, and thank you for the motion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Record show unanimous approval of item I7. Item I8 is consideration of adopting an ordinance in the matter of amending ordinance 626 regarding changing the membership rights and certain members of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and modifying certain duties and responsibilities of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and its members. We have that, the ordinance before with us.
Mhm.
If we approved it unanimously, it would go into effect now. No, we're doing the two readings, 13.
Yeah,
the
correct.
days apart.
We talked
So it's the
about
first reading.
not declaring
Yeah.
an emergency and adopting this as an emergency ordinance. So today would be the first reading.
Okay.
And then the second reading needs to be at least 13 days from now. So I would suggest we bring it back in 2 weeks. But if there are any comments or suggestions or revisions, now would be the time to discuss those, and then we could make those corrections. Appreciate the comments that I've got from folks. We've already corrected a number of errors in the interest of getting this done quickly. I tried to get this out as fast as possible, and I ran spell check a couple of times, but you just never know.
So do I not get to vote twice? Or sign it twice?
Yeah, that's one that we've
That was the one I
corrected.
thought was funny. personally.
That's one that we've corrected as well.
Thank you.
So yeah, what this is different in one way from the previous draft amendment that you had, in that draft listed the nine members and the way in which they would be selected.
Yeah.
I did not include that here because, as we talked at the last work session, we're going to be staying with 7 members. And so I took the liberty of sticking with the language that we currently have as to how the 7 members of the existing committee are selected, at least in terms of geography and diversity.
Yeah.
So if you'd like, we could reconsider that and add back some sort of a list. We need to determine where it is that you'd like those to come from. The way it reads now is the 5 voting members would be selected with due regard to geographical considerations, and the 2 non-voting members would be the representatives of the franchisees and licensees.
And I liked how you did that, actually.
Yeah.
So
That's fine.
it simplified it to me.
Mhm,
And
yes.
given the other changes we made with the non-voting of the vendors, is I think 7, I'm fine in taking 9 out of the ordinance and just dropping
Okay.
and having 7. I'm fine with that.
Thank you very much for getting it back to us so quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And again, as we discussed, the 2 franchisee and licensee representatives would now, moving forward, be non-voting members. A quorum would consist of the majority of the voting members, so the board could conduct business with as few as 3 members. We also included some language about tasking the committee with going back and drafting bylaws and bringing those bylaws back to the board for consideration, as well as coming back with some additional details around the updates to be provided to the committee periodically by the franchisees, and also a way in which a committee member could be removed for a failure to attend at least 50% of the meetings in a 12-month period. Trying to think if there were any other significant issues that we chatted about that I wanted to bring your attention to. The minutes will now include any public comment that's received at each meeting. That was another recommendation that we'd received. And the updates that the franchisees and licensees are supposed to provide to the board, those would be distributed not less than 72 hours before each meeting, so that members of the committee have a chance to review those and have time to consider anything in there before the meeting itself. I think
And
that
then
was it.
you also added the draft of the meetings within 72 hours after the.
Oh, right.
And I thought that was a good
Minutes.
addition. I couldn't remember if we discussed that or not, but I really appreciate getting it out there so quickly.
Thank you. That's right. They'll use their best efforts to circulate a draft of the minutes shortly after the meeting.
Yeah.
Recognizing that formal adoption won't happen until the next meeting.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
one thing when I read that, and I don't know if I just read it wrong or misstated it, on the removal for not attending
Yeah.
the required number of members. Does that can't really apply to the non-voting members? because we don't really select the non-voting members. The franchisees actually appoint the non-voting members. So how would the non-voting members, how would they be removed by?
The way I've seen this work before is for one of the non-voting members, that particular individual would be removed from the committee, and then the franchisee would be free to appoint a different
person.
representative for the franchisee in hopes that that individual would be able to attend.
So
More
that
frequently.
the committee then can remove a non-voting member.
Yeah, with hopes that whoever
That
they're
the-
replaced with, yes, there need to be representatives on the committee. So hopefully it's not a revolving door of
That's what I
appointees that aren't
That's what I
attending.
wanted to
That
make
would certainly not be in the spirit of the committee, but
Yeah.
that's how I would see that working.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Any other comments? Yeah, I appreciated the changes as you made the modifications.
So if there are no other questions, if we call for the first reading,
Please, can we have the first reading?
and hearing no objection, the first reading would be by title only. This is in the matter of an ordinance amending ordinance 626, the solid waste ordinance, to change the membership rights and certain members of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, to modify certain duties and responsibilities of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee and its members. The ordinance has not been assigned a number yet, but it will be assigned the next numeric ordinance number. So that's the first reading by title only, second reading to follow 2 weeks from today. And then at that point, the board would be able to deliberate and take final action on the adoption of the ordinance, which, since it's not an emergency, would take effect 90 days from adoption.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and since there's no further action from the Board of Commissioners right now on item I-8, we'll move on to item I-9, which is consideration of submitting a letter of support for community home builders. And Commissioner, I think it looks like you have information
I do.
on it, and thank you for bringing it up, because it was on my to-do list, but he must have also sent you the email too.
Right, and I want to say how much I've appreciated this organization in our community. We've been at a number of groundbreakings, and to just watch the engagement and the buy-in to the clientele. Interestingly enough, they do work with YCAP and Housing Authority, and it's basically the same clients. And it's something that I think we should support, because it basically gets people into home ownership that might never have that option. So I would suggest that we sign this letter, and I believe I've sent it on to Carrie and Ken,
Okay, great.
which is a letter of support for the project.
Perfect. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you. I think we all would like to do that. Do we need, Ken and Carolina, do we need a motion?
To submit the letter.
Okay. Well, then I would move that we approve submitting a letter of support for the community home builders. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item I-9.
Mr. Chair,
Thank you.
before we move to public hearings, I'd like to add a number 10
Oh, yeah.
to the other business. And number 10 would be regarding the request by the McKinley-Kiwanis and Larry Stover to install a peace pole in the county, and they will bear all the costs. And that I'd like to see it put someplace in a predominant area where it's not stuck in a corner. So I'd like to have a little discussion on that.
Yeah, Larry Strober also approached me a couple of months ago, and I suggested that it was something that we might want to wait until it's into the fall. So I appreciate him bringing this forward.
Well, that came to us, I think, originally, and I don't know if Commissioner Starrett remembers, about 3.5 years ago. And the sticking point then was that the county would be required to put in the base and do the mountain and everything, and furnish the peace pole, so there would have been a financial impact on the county. I think it was like $450 or something. But since they're willing to do this, we just have to pick out the place that we've done. I would support the installation of myself with a peace pole in a prominent location where it's visible.
Okay, thank you. And then you were about to say something.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I know in the past, we've had art installations in front of the clerk's office because it's on the corner, it gets a lot of traffic.
Mhm.
Perhaps that's an option. I'm trying to think of where else.
Well,
Right.
it could, I guess, go in front of, the White House, not where the county sign, where the commissioner's office sign is, but maybe on the other side of the sidewalk between the driveway and the sidewalk, that period of grass. But I think that would be up to staff to work with the Quantas and Lonston to determine the best place to put it.
And facilities, if they want
Yes.
to weigh in on
Yes, definitely.
where they think it should go.
And maybe up to them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to direct. So would it be a directing of staff to work with Larry
Direct
Server?
with staff working with Larry Stover to place the installation
Yeah.
of a peace pole in a prominent location.
Sounds good. Any more information, or should we?
No, I don't think it even requires formal action.
Okay.
Hear a consensus from the board that you'd like to explore this, and we'll take a look at options available in placement.
Okay, thank you very
And I
much.
will respond back to Larry
Okay,
saying that it's consensus of the board that we do this, and that the county administrator, any questions, he should deal with that.
Yeah, you can connect with me directly, but more than likely, I'll probably delegate this to our facility. I'll probably be the primary contact to
Okay.
make sure that we find the appropriate spot.
Okay, I will just
Great.
respond back.
And we don't place it anywhere that may get utilities or anything.
Yeah.
So,
sounds great. No hitting underground sprinklers for the yard or something.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you for
Thank you.
bringing that up. Move on to item J, I believe, is public hearing.
Before you
Oh,
move on,
yes.
Commissioner, I reminded you had a add-on.
Thank you for reminding me of the thing that I wrote down on my notebook and then I flipped the page. So commissioners, you received likely from
Gina,
Gina and Sarah at AOC, the request for signatures on signature of support for this project before it goes to the e-board on Friday. And this would be for allocating funding for the purchase of hotels to house people in this interim period where really for the wildfires, it's after the Red Cross funding runs out, right? So there's a period of time when people need housing that's safe, but we don't have trailers, RVs, mobile homes that are ready to go back on their home sites. And then it also would be for folks who are at high risk of COVID-related complications who need non-congregate shelter. Essentially, it's similar to what we're doing with YCAP in the cities of McMinnville and Newburgh. Do you have thoughts on it?
I do.
Okay, great.
Initially, it sounds wonderful, but
Right.
like all government programs that are designed to have a beneficial impact, there's always the unintended consequences. And when you look at the concept of purchasing motels that would provide these rooms, it sounds good, but basically we're purchasing homeless shelters. And I don't know that that would be something that, because again, once you have a program and a project that is in the works, and I have to definitely applaud the YCAP program, but it is not a program that appears to be going away. I haven't seen one program since I've been here that was funded that went away. Look at the needle exchange program. Perhaps that doesn't have the underpinnings of success, but we continue to fund it, not necessarily the county, but now the CCO. So I want to make sure that we're not supporting something that has unintended consequences. I know we've got empty rooms here at the Mission, and it's going to be 30 degrees, and we've got people sleeping on the streets, and the Mission can't get from point A to point B in terms of dealing with regulations with the city. I think what we have to do is work on a local level to try to make sure that we move these obstacles out of the way. But as far as funding the purchase of motels statewide, I would not be in favor of that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
I guess, Commissioner, I'm not really in favor for maybe a little bit different
Mhm.
reason than Commissioner Sterrett. I'm concerned that as the state goes in and, number one, the equity of how these are purchased, where they're purchased. But as the state goes in and does this, I'm very concerned that these a lot of the hotels and motels are in a populated commercial area. And I'm really concerned that I think they would have an impact on the economy of that local area, because you won't see maybe new businesses building next to it. You might see businesses around it moving away. So the reason I'm opposed to it is I just don't believe in two things. One, how they'd be allocated, but number two, I am not pleased with what it had to do for the local economy.
Thank you.
So how does this compare then to the Whitecap motel project? Then, I mean, have you heard that businesses aren't setting up next to the motel?
Well, basically, other than those and a couple ones, there isn't there. Some of the other states you're hearing about, or counties you're hearing about, like Marion County, Commissioner Cameron, buying one that's right on Lancaster, it's right in the middle of a big economic area.
Okay,
I don't think, number one, we see it because it's only a certain number of rooms. But if you're talking about purchasing a motel that may have 70 to 80 to 90 rooms,
Mhm.
and once the government owns it, it's always going to be used for that. It'll never be turned back into commercial use. It'll be used for some other governmental program. And I don't know what those would be, because it doesn't say, but I guess I think in theory, it's good, but where the rubber meets the ground, I don't care for it.
so I believe that part of the long-term, my understanding, part of the long-term vision is that if you recall, there was a bill that included funding for non-congregate, or for shelters with navigation centers in a couple of cities in Oregon. And so my understanding is that some of that is that they're realizing that motel owners who can't keep their occupancy rates are going to go out of business. And there's an opportunity to reduce the total cost of sheltering people because the assets are there. We don't need to build them. And they can be immediately used, obviously, for wildfire victims, people who've lost their homes, for people at high risk of complications from COVID. But then going forward, we're spending fewer tax dollars, and we're keeping these assets in use, essentially. And that's an economic development argument, right?
With the fire, so I don't have any issue about that portion of it. But one of the questions I asked that at AOC, and I couldn't get an answer for, was right now as a hotel or a motel, there are certain fire and life requirements they have to meet. But if it was a permanent housing situation, what's the difference between the fire and life safety, and how much would have to be put into that structure to make it a permanent housing place instead of a transit lodging?
Mhm.
And I can't get the answer to that, because we can buy a building, might end up costing more to refurb that building than to put in a new Compass Center or something like that someplace. So I don't think it's been fleshed out enough. Now, purchasing hotel rooms for particular needs like wildfire in the Salem area, Eugene area, even the Lincoln City area because of high weight team, that makes sense to me, but I don't think the E-board's gonna buy all of it, but that's just my opinion.
And another thought I had
Yes,
is,
please.
as far as that is, to your point, Commissioner, about the number of rooms, the reason why the motel owners were so amenable to giving us that, for instance, that reduced rate, that $69, is because basically the governor shut their business down. They had no option. They either take what is in essence a Section 8 client, or they wind up losing any kind of income going forward. So they were put in a no-win situation. I think going forward that no business owner would choose to have that be their permanent, complete clientele. I also think that when we're talking about wildfires, it really does tug on the hearts to see people who've lost everything. But I don't want to use this as a smokescreen, excuse the pun, for beginning a project that really will never have an end. I mean, yes, this is a difficult situation statewide for those who've lost their homes. But again, you're basically turning a motel into a homeless shelter. And in these areas, as you talk about in commercial areas, instead of having people that are in there that are contributing to the economy, you have people who are maybe are perhaps not contributing as much. I just don't see it as something I would want to support.
Well, thank you.
I guess I feel the same way, but mine's strict mostly almost for the economy issue. And so and Mary, you were right exactly by saying the motel hotel owners now wouldn't be doing this if they weren't being forced into doing it for their business model. Because the only way they can survive at all right now is by doing those rooms. So, and eventually when COVID's over, it's going to stop, but yet the program by itself will just continue because we have the state or the local government, whoever owns the buildings. So naturally, it's just going to continue.
I mean, I guess the argument then is we've seen that 66% of Yamhill County folks who've gone into the motel sheltering project have moved on to permanent stable housing, right? Meaning that they're not costing the system the amount of money that it costs everybody, ER, jail, sheriff's office, patrol, courts, mental health services, by being on the street chronically homeless. So, in theory, going forward, this is an opportunity to actually reduce our costs by having access to facilities, right?
But I also think personally it decreases the cost, but what it does is you may increase the cost to other businesses and everything around it. So we're decreasing the cost, and yeah, there's 66%, I think is great. Now that's based on our numbers. If you take an institute or one that has 80 of them, I wonder if the number would still be 66%. I don't think so.
Right, and there are communities that are much bigger, obviously. So that's why, if you had a whole motel.
Right, I think, Casey, if we had this right now, and COVID was over right now, where most people can go out, and whether they want to live on the streets or whatever they can do, that 60% success rate would drop dramatically because they may have other options, but I don't know. That's just my opinion.
One question: I had to leave early from a legislative committee. Did they talk about the Project Turnkey?
I didn't hear it
At
brought up.
AFC?
I wasn't on it. So.
I was there. I didn't hear it brought
Okay,
up.
I didn't while I
This
was
is
on
the
it.
first
So.
I'm hearing about it.
Okay, I do know that they mentioned that there was a meeting of county chairs on last Thursday, something like that, which I will address in announcements.
Okay.
Yeah. And they did mention it at that, but it sounded like it was something that you had talked about.
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I think that when you talk about the YCAP program, it's wonderful to hear those success stories. But remember that the whole purpose of this program was to take people who, because of the COVID situation, who could not be housed in congregate shelters.
Right.
So what happens is it's kind of like the camel's nose in the tent. It's the open door. It's the way we begin these projects. It is for a temporary, it's a solution to a temporary problem, but it winds up being a permanent solution. And now here we go. So I don't see the program necessarily ending that YCAP has going, and maybe it shouldn't. But I also know that because we can have the county and we can have YCAP and our local partners really working and addressing these issues, we can have the success rates that we have.
Right.
Bring in the state, bring in larger municipalities, and we know that that's not necessarily, because not everybody's Yamhill County. Not everybody does the engagement that is done here, especially through our CAP agency.
Right. And as far as I understand, this is not the state's going to go in and buy a motel and run a program. This is so that municipalities and counties can together purchase. And an example is that in Lane County, they actually went to purchase a motel early on to do the exact thing that YCAP is doing now through renting rooms, because they did the math and they were like, oh my gosh, this is so much money. In their case, they ended up it was more affordable to purchase an old medical clinic, oddly enough, that was sitting empty than to purchase a motel, which I think in the long run, something like that does make more sense if you're thinking about both housing people who need housing and also for economic development purposes. But in their case, it was a very specific. Lane County said, we know that there's a need desperately for non-congregate shelter, and then went with it.
Well, I would have no problem changing my mind at all if number one, I had insurance as the state won't stay involved in it, which I don't.
Mhm.
But if they said, okay, Yamhill County, this is what we figured out your shares, we're just gonna give you the money you use on us, so we can use it on our NICAP programs there. We could use it just the way we want. But state programs don't work that. Let's face it, state programs don't work that way. The state will always, through something in the legislation, the state will always be involved in it.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. The other thing is I like the flexibility of the YCAP program in that it's one of those things that can expand and contract
Mhm.
as needed. Not that there will ever be a contraction in the need of people who need to be given an option.
Sure.
But I like that we do have that flexibility in renting rooms for the need and spending more time, for instance, on the beds that are sitting empty over at our brand new mission and that can't get occupancy permits or whatever the holdups are, that we work on that locally.
And to be clear, based upon the emails that I've seen from Heather Richards, they have an occupancy permit. They have both their temporary and their permit. I just want to clarify.
Well-
Since we are on the record right now, that's the emails I've seen
Right, no.
Well-
from Kay.
Right, I've been
Runs the program.
contacting Kay as well, and I think there's a difference there.
The city and Southwest, when they first put that together,
Mhm.
the way it was sized, the number that they have, and I think Heather said in her email, the way they did the evaluation for life safety only allows so many beds, so they have more beds than they're allowed. And the only way they can use all the beds they're allowed is by upgrading their fire and life safety program now.
Right.
If we had money or had money, say, okay, you want to use all the beds? Here's a grant, like we got money from the state, under this program. Said, here, tell us what it costs to upgrade that, so we can put that in use, so you could use all your beds.
And-
That's a whole different story.
So to clarify, because you talked about the state and concerns about the state having their, essentially having their fingers in the business, that you alluded to the success of having all these groups working together. The project turnkey is actually specifically Oregon Community Foundation ends up being the fiscal agent. So it immediately, the money gets transferred to Oregon Community Foundation for distribution to community-based organizations. So that would be YCAP, that would be jurisdiction. So it immediately goes out of the state's hands. Oregon Housing Community Services doesn't have a part of it, which is probably good because they have enough work with FEMA right now.
But I wonder how much of that money that the board would approve, how much of that money would actually go to the metropolitan area and not go to the small rural areas. I mean, Oregon Community Foundation, they're real good at giving out money to the small communities and counties and everything, organizations. But that kind of money, that because of the way that the Oregon Community Foundation raises money, that a lot of that is going to be go to the Multnomah County, City of Portland programs. That's where it's going to. That's fact life. That's where the biggest need is. So I'd rather keep it like we give us the money, or keep. I like our program with YCAP, our hotel, our rental program, our room program. Because you're right, you can expand it, you can contract it, you can do anything we want it to, without only the county and our partner saying what happens.
Okay, and then you wanted to say something.
Just a question, because when you designate money for the purchase of motels, I think right there, that's to me, I'm a little concerned about that because that does not give us, that's restrictive. And that doesn't give us the option of doing a variety of things. And we know there are a variety of things we can do.
Yeah.
So I am concerned about money used specifically to purchase a motel, because it turns a motel
Mhm.
from a motel into a de facto homeless shelter.
Okay.
Now, we know that, for instance, the Mission is able to and has made the decision to remove the clean and sober provision for housing for the next couple of nights because of the temperature. And,
Right.
and I appreciate that, because whether a person is clean and sober or not, they're still going to be cold. So that's important. But when you have, and then we've also seen a concern in our community about low barrier shelters. It's been an issue before.
Sure.
So when you have a motel that becomes a homeless shelter, we're now concerned with, we've got the problems that come with trying to figure out how we're going to define it. Is it low barrier? Is it not low barrier?
Right.
And therein, you've got an issue in that surrounding area.
Sure.
So I guess it's just the purchase of the motels, not the, here's the money, use it
Mhm.
for your programs.
Right. And to clarify, I think it's important that you also noted that this doesn't say anything about a low barrier or a no barrier shelter.
But-
And that's, I think that makes you make a really good point, that this doesn't say anything about that. It's not saying purchase of for a low barrier or a zero barrier shelter. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm not comfortable with it at this juncture,
Mhm.
with what I know about it.
Yeah.
I'd be open to hearing more, but I would not be signing on a letter of
One
support.
of
Yeah.
the things of my issue, I even brought it up here at the county, is that on several occasions, is that this is a hurry up and do it now,
Mhm.
which gives us, since they want it by Friday, tomorrow, Lonston,
I think it's, they're asking for support, not support by
AOC.
today at 2, but it's for tomorrow's, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, now we're having this long, we've already scratched the surface, really, of it. So they're asking us to make a decision and get to them this afternoon for it to be for tomorrow. I just personally, when people do that, this hurry up and wait thing, it's like, give us enough information to review, time to review the information, because I can't believe AOC didn't know about this a while back. So why are we only given till this afternoon to decide to sign it or not? Why wasn't this here a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
And in their defense, sometimes the
Oh, yeah.
stuff comes flying through at the speed of light, and you don't have a lot of time to
Right.
react.
And I agree, and
Thank
I don't believe it necessarily on AOC, because AOC has come a long way since I've been on AOC, since I've been a commissioner. They've become a long way, got a great executive director, they've got great legislative people. And so the better people you have, the more they want to get done. And so I don't necessarily blame AOC, I blame the process in which it gets to. But that's just my opinion. But I'm not for signing it.
Okay.
Now, if they want to let individual commissioners sign it,
Yes,
think
that's actually the
that's
request.
possible.
Yeah,
You
that is
cer-
the
yeah,
request,
you
is for
certainly-
individual
Right.
commissioners,
you
yeah.
can certainly sign it, I'm not going to sign it.
But yeah, so I think they're asking for,
Yeah,
Individual-
yeah, I
For
don't
your
think they're asking,
signature.
yeah, they're not asking for necessarily for each board to address it.
Right.
Partly because not every board meets on Thursday morning.
Yeah. But I'd certainly appreciate you putting it on for this.
Yeah,
yes,
no,
thank you for the discussion.
Thank you for participating in the discussion, I appreciate it.
No, thank you, Commissioner.
I was about to say, damn it, but we're on TV, so I can't. This is starting to feel like Zoom roundtable. No, thank you, Al. Wait, she's not here.
That was pretty
Yeah.
fun.
Okay, thank you for, by the way, speaking of things, and for bringing it up, because I did forget. On to item K, which is announcements and commissioners.
Well, the only announcement I really have is, this afternoon, we have a YCTA board meeting at 3:00, I think it is, Ken. And one of the things that's gonna be discussed is the bus stops and everything, and where they should go, and whether we should put them in our shelters and everything, so I hope through that discussion that I'm going to, if not somebody else, that will specifically raise the one for the Christian church in Newburgh. and make sure that does not get forgotten about, that does get honored, because I think it's a big need for it, so.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
other than that, the NACO Healthy Communities subgroup, I thought we had problems with sometimes with some of the way that the difference we have opinions we have, like even in AOC. Trying to get through some of these meetings with NACO, you know, like the healthy counties. What a healthy county is to us is strictly different than what a healthy county is back east. I mean, even the diverse of views, you know, it's tough, but it's fun to listen to because I've learned a lot from it. And given the way we do it in Oregon, but the way we do it in Oregon does for a lot of the people on the committee. The way we do it in Oregon doesn't seem to make much difference because most of the committees from east of the Mississippi River. So.
Right.
But I've been attending those, and then the transportation, NACO transportation is still pushing for a major infrastructure bill. And hopefully that's one of their top priorities, to get a major infrastructure bill. Push through not only for highways, but for water infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, and so we'll see what comes out of that.
Okay, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And Commissioner, it sounds like you had a meeting with the FAA, but tell us when you can tell us.
Oh,
more. How
well,
about that?
basically, you know, we do have an airport in Newburgh, the Sportsman Air Park, and that for a number of years, the owners, Jerry and Leslie Dale, have been really trying to either work with the city in Newburgh or work with the county to get a sponsor for an FAA grant, which would help them with really cost prohibitive
I'm sure.
repairs. And there has been quite a holdup at the FAA. It's taken us, let's see, Christian, that was a year ago almost that we began the conversations. I did get so we wound up having a Zoom meeting with all of the parties. And one of the things that I did receive a phone call later on after our Zoom meeting from Mr. Garrett from the FAA, who said extensive and effusive apologies because this position had been left pretty much vacant. And
Okay.
he said, I look back at how long ago this you guys reached out to us, and I'm embarrassed. So hopefully we've gotten their attention, and we'll begin to look at the process of whether or not we can help them in any way getting that grant.
Great.
Well, I hope-
We would end up being like a fiscal agent or something. Is that how? you
Well,
think it-
actually, no, a little
Oh,
bit
okay.
more than that.
But I hope so. 'Cause
How do you feel about owning an airport?
Actually,
Give me a couple of hours, maybe.
I hope we do make a progress, because I think one of the things that isn't taken into consideration, and definitely should be for Sportsman's Air Park, is as like McMinnville putting their $1.9 million into a whole new apron, more tie downs and everything. As McMinnville sees more commercial type, that means not big jets, but more commercial type traffic and charter traffic. The general aviation traffic, we're seeing less general aviation traffic. Those general aviation flights have to go someplace.
Mhm.
And Newburgh is one of the favorite places where I think it's gonna see a growth. In the Newburgh Airport, it's gonna see a growth of general aviation traffic. But when you have an airport that's not able to grow and not able to make repairs, I think that's a problem for all of the Amber County, not just Newburgh.
Right. Yeah.
I
So,
think that, oh, sorry.
no, I was just going to say it's one of those things where they're not building any more
Yeah.
airports, so we might as well take care of the ones that we have.
Right, right. And I think that, referencing somebody who's still in the room, now that the mill site is in beginning of redevelopment, having something literally across the bypass seems like it could help.
Economic
I don't
development.
actually know how that would, what that would be, but the fact that there's an airport right across the
Would help.
bypass
I mean,
seems
it
like a
has to,
positive
it
thing,
has to.
right?
Absolutely. So anyway, that's just something it's not one of those things that happens overnight, as we have discovered.
Right.
But
You have other things.
the other thing is I wanted to share these pictures with you, and this is, if you remember the Lafayette property, that is the property that we wound up giving to the housing authority.
I forget it was that bad.
And that's what's happening there. It's a demolition project. The only thing that's going to remain is the garage. And they've entered into a contract to build a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. It's a single family lot. But if you see the extent of why that basically needs to be that basically needs to be removed and remediated. And there's going to be a huge amount of site cleanup. So those are the before copies. You'll also see the Dayton property that was rehabbed, and you'll see that a family bought it, and it's
That
a
was the one.
wonderful story.
Fantastic.
And also, they're working to develop a plan. There's a common wall lot in Lafayette, another one of the county foreclosed properties that they're doing an assessment on to see what kind of a need there would be for that kind of housing. But you'll remember those pictures, because when they're done, it's going to be, and there's a manufactured home on there. The other thing is that, where are we? Oh, in terms of foreclosures, that government-backed mortgages, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mae, those types of things, the Housing Authority is working with, trying to help folks with those, but the privately held mortgages, there's no moratorium on foreclosures there. So that's just the update from Affordable Housing Corporation and the Housing Authority.
Were you able, did you have a meeting with Leah Horner this week?
She canceled
Oh, okay.
and wanted to have it today. Wound up, they're going to do it every other week starting next Thursday.
Okay.
But Commissioner Pope and I have Northwest Seniors this afternoon, so we couldn't make it, but there was no meeting.
Okay. That sounds good. All right. Along those lines, meetings. Gina at AOC called together. Ken was not available at the moment because I think he was actually taking some time to be a person rather than just county administrator on Friday to go over the remaining balance of CRF dollars at the state. And it was prompted by Katie Koba at DAS, said, "Oh, by the way, everybody, you've only spent 40% of your money. Do you have a plan?" So she really wanted to know, Gina wanted to know to be able to report back in combined with League of Oregon Cities that yes, counties have a plan or no, they don't have a plan, so that if needed, money can get transferred from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Because there are some counties who've spent it all. You know some of those. There are some counties that have spent very little of it and don't seem to be. And then there are counties who have spent it all and really are looking for more for specific needs around COVID. So we went around the room and talked about it. And essentially every county that was represented on the call had plans to spend it. I tried my best to represent us. Sorry?
Not by December 31st.
Well, so it sounds like most of them, that is the plan. And part of it is because I think as Ken has really figured out, it's when we cut the check is when it's reimbursable by the CRF, pot of money, not when it's spent. Unlike some of the other ones, like there's a COVID broadband project and you have to have it done and serving people by the end of the year. And that's a tremendous lift, but that's different than the county-specific CRF dollars, which just need to be cut from the county by then. And so they're, like the dollars that were reimbursed through December 31st, there'll be a request for those, whatever, there's like a name for it, but you'll be able to submit, between December 31st and January 20th or something like that. So there still is a little bit of flexibility there. It doesn't have to be
after 31st for programs that were completed.
Right.
Things are completed.
Yeah, exactly.
And they needed to do that because the reimbursement, because we're submitting for reimbursement, so, and because the funding is available through the month of December, you have all the timing of invoices and everything else, those expenses aren't necessarily accounted for, some of the bills don't come in until the next month.
Right.
Exactly.
And so being able to capture that in that period.
And one of the things I explained to Gina and to other counties was kind of, what Ken has explained to us or explained to me is, even though it doesn't look like we've spent, all of our money or whatever, that's really intentional, is because at the beginning, as Ken has mentioned, we didn't know how many expenses we would have. And even in July, it's like, well, if we have a very big surge of cases, we might need it to be renting every motel room in the county. Like we didn't know. And a lot of other counties And a lot of the county administrators who were on the calls were like, this is what we were doing too. And be as conservative as possible with the money that we have, and then looking to larger projects like for Polk County with their internet expansion.
Sure.
Once they realize, okay, we're not going to be spending it on this and this and this. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, it is.
And the Secretary of State's office been in touch with DAS and said, okay, you guys need to get your act together in terms of how this is being audited and what we're looking at.
I
So
saw that. Yeah.
that was kind of an interesting component of late.
Yes, I read an article in the Oregonian about it, and I was channeling good thoughts to our county administrator.
Yeah, so appreciate it.
The other thing is that the Santiam Canyon, it's like the Santiam Canyon Economic Response Team is meeting every Thursday morning, so I'll miss it next week. But they've had there's a lot of focus right now going into the canyon. We talked this week about housing specifically, and how to go from the Red Cross to final somebody back on their home sites, and what that looks like, and whether that's even going to be possible in some cases. So like Mill City is looking at either rezoning or redesignating some of the city-owned land, including in some cases parkland, to be future housing sites, because they can't figure out how to get them into other sites, like returning back onto their original home site. And this is more associated with mobile home parks and trailer parks.
Mhm.
So that's one where it was good to hear from Oregon Housing and Community Services specifically about that. A lot of work is going into that canyon, and if you have anything you want me to share specifically with them, by all means, and you're welcome to attend it as well.
Somebody want to come out, would you please?
I will. Yeah, it's 8 to 9:30 on Thursday mornings.
Okay, somebody want to come out.
Okay, I will do.
And if you do intend on this so we can get it on the calendar, more than one of you is going to
Yes.
get that on the.
Because it is a government, it is a government. Wow.
That's the abundance of caution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it has an agenda and it's recorded. So, and they capture the notes in the Zoom chat. So,
So I'll let you know if I could start attending it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah, and Commissioner Nyquist and Commissioner Tucker both attend, and Commissioner Willis sometimes attends, but it's generally Commissioner Cameron.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And then the last thing I just wanted to bring up is that there was a request a couple of months ago from the Yamhill Tourism Partnership to consider asking us to consider whether it could be made an advisory committee of the county. And we discussed a little bit at the time after the presentation about what that would look like. And I was just realizing, I thought I would present this to you for further discussion down the road. I'm not as familiar with EDAC as I think you are, but it sure seems like the tourism partnership it would be simple for them to just become a subcommittee of EDAC. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I don't want to make this into a work session, but I thought, well, as I was driving here, I thought about that.
The only thing I can tell you, Casey, is they are a member of WAVA, Lime Valley.
Yeah.
Their association, they're a member of all of the different groups.
Mhm.
And so they do have all that, but the problem is actually, we've almost taken WAVA over basically, which is the Salem Visitors Association.
Yeah.
We've done such a much better job, but what they're running up against now is for no budget whatsoever,
Mhm.
that and the volunteers on that committee are just wonderful.
Yeah.
Phil Higgins was one of them.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But the problem about it is now is they're just limited on what they can do for economic marketing and economic development.
Mhm.
But yes, Sabashaw and I have talked about that
Okay.
and being a subboard, but it's such a specific niche,
Mhm.
that said they don't really fit into SEDCOR's. I mean, you can belong as a SEDCOR member, but the committee really doesn't fit into SEDCOR's niche.
But is EDAC, I thought EDAC was an advisory committee of the county and not a member of SEDCOR.
Well, no, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. And that is because then they're advisory to the board, who then makes those recommendations to
Or
SEDCOR
funding.
based on what they've recommended to us, but I think that makes sense for it to
Yeah.
live at EDAC.
Since it's a component, it's some part of economic development, in my view.
You know, when I talked to Phil before, they wanted it before the end of the year, because they really have their newsletters, everything they put out so good,
Yeah.
that they would like to come in and do just to the board a presentation on what it actually, Emerald County Tourism Partnerships really is,
Mhm.
and how their funding goes, what they belong to and everything. And I think for the future, even if they become a member, like if we put them on under EDAC, I think for commissioners, just to know just the function they provide would be very.
Doing like a regular update.
Yeah, just to have them come in and do an initial presentation, that's about what the services and stuff they provide.
Right.
So,
I'm glad you understand what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah, because I'm wondering then, I don't know that the makeup of EDAC at this point
Mhm.
necessarily represents that
That
sector.
niche, yeah.
So if we did, then maybe we could add members of the tourism partnership or.
yeah.
Right,
blah,
yeah, I
blah,
thought, but I should start by looking at I know who the members are at EDAC, but looking at whether they have bylaws. But it was literally just driving here that I was like, well, that would be a simple step. We wouldn't really have to do much.
I don't think they have bylaws. We just did that.
Oh, okay, good job.
Because we just made them a committee under us. and advised-
To do our grants.
Oh,
So we
That's the
didn't-
only thing they
We've
want.
never said you
Yeah.
have bylaws, you just are, can you please advise us instead of us making the decisions on who
Okay.
gets the grant money?
Oh, okay.
And what I'd like,
Correctly, I thought EDAC was more advisory to Avishon said for advisory.
it is.
Okay.
Basically.
But they do act as the review for the grant program.
Mhm.
So it's an.
Okay, yeah.
And that's, I haven't looked at it, I'm not really prepared to.
Yeah, totally.
No, but
And
I
then this
think-
is just my initial, I wanted to get you thinking.
Yeah, I think Mary is along the right track. I guess my first thing would be to let them to come in and take a half an hour, whatever, at a presentation, a work group,
Mhm.
and just do a presentation of what they do now. That would help us and everything understand about what their functions are and if it's something that really belongs under EDAC.
Right, because maybe it doesn't. That was just my initial.
Yeah, and maybe Abhishek could be part of that discussion as well.
I think she
Yeah.
could when they do. Matter of fact, I think Abishai should take part when if the commissioners want them to come in and be able to do a half an hour, 45-minute presentation, then I think, because I go to a lot of meetings on the afternoons. They're usually the same time I have other meetings. But, like I won't go to today's because we have the YCTA meeting. But I think I'd like to, with the okay of the other commissioners, at least have Ken schedule sometime and work with them to schedule a work session just to come in and just do a presentation on.
That'd be great. And then we might have the opportunity then after thinking about it
We can decide
more and
really
checking with
well.
Abhishek.
Right,
About whether that makes sense, what kind of structure.
that makes
I
sense.
mean, it is obviously an enormous part of our business landscape.
Yeah, because even.
And EDAC is much more traded sector.
Yeah, well, it's even if they, and this isn't about funding, I mean, eventually it can become funding, but they would just like to be, their initial goal is to be a non-funded advisory
Mhm.
committee to the commission, just so they can tell the commission every quarter, every 6 months, what's going on, just much like SWAC.
Yeah.
But without all the legality around it.
Let's not say
So,
so.
Without all the
Right.
drama.
Yes, it can.
Parks Board.
Yeah, right.
You want to reach out, I think I'm hearing consensus, we might want at least a presentation for them.
If they have something that they'd like to come and present, or if there's a specific subject, they can reach out to me.
Okay,
Okay, I'll get a hold of Michelle
thank
Kaufman and have her, she's from, Stoller Group.
Mhm.
She's one that's kind of been heading this up, brilliant lady. I'll have her get a hold of you. Thank
okay.
you, commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank
That was
you.
a long announcement, sorry.
Thank you.
Christian? All right, thank you. Ken? Ashley? Carolina? All right, with that, I'll close this meeting. Board of County Board of Commissioners.
Thank you.
And before noon.